There's roughly 500 complaints every year of racial profiling from the police. Less than 2% of those result in disciplinary sanctions. So every time the cops shoot you, they're right. Every time you claim the cops racially profiled you, you're wrong.
On Friday, June 12th, Fadi Dager, the Montreal police chief, held a press conference at 10:30 p.m. Unprecedented to hold a press conference at that time at such a late point in the night. But clearly, it couldn't be avoided. It was something urgent. Details are slowly coming out of a report that comes after months of investigation since March of absolutely heinous racist acts being committed by the night watch, the night patrol of Station 39, Montreal-Nord. Locs being kept as trophies. It's only part of the allegations that have come out, but there's huge implications about systemic racism, about the nature of police in the city. The following interviews with Christopher Curtis, who was present at the protest last night outside of the station. Here's the interview. Hello, everyone. My name is Kalden Dhatsenpa. You are enjoying Local 514. Today's guest, Christopher Curtis, editor-in-chief at the Rover, a friend of mine. I have Chris here, a veteran journalist, talking about a piece of breaking news, developing very quickly, probably the biggest story I've seen in a bit of time here in Montreal. Yeah. The facts on the ground, it's surrounding Station 39 in Montreal-Nord, a predominantly black neighborhood. 16 police officers have been are at the center of this scandal where there's reports of allegations of incredibly racist acts organized sort of by the night shift, the people running the night patrols. Some of the allegations to have come out are pretty horrific. We hear stories of officers collecting locs of people that they either detain or stop and frisk, and they keep it as trophies, you know. I think there's a level
it strikes you as something a killer would do, you know.
Yeah, because there's like a certain game to it, you know. Of course, since then everyone is up in arms. Growing calls for further investigations to also, because currently the investigations are by the SPVM themselves. People are calling for the province.
The mayor is calling for an independent inquiry.
There we go.
The liberals, the provincial liberals, because of course they want to ride the political wave. Everybody does. They're calling for the SQ to investigate the SPVM, the provincial police. That traditionally hasn't really worked out in the past. And the mayor says there cannot be a public inquiry into this until charges are laid. So, but people are calling for public inquiry into what the police have done here. And I think I have a couple of sources close to this that say this is probably just the beginning, that we'll probably hear more really shocking behavior. These are mostly young men, these officers, who come from outside of the island of Montreal, and who, by all appearance, seem to be treating their job as like not serving the community, but as like some kind of occupying army. And yesterday, you know, Ode, our colleague, Zach, our other colleague, and we were there as well. The Rover was there as well. And you at
the protest, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. There was a protest last night. It's Tuesday morning, protest on Monday night, and the anger is like super palpable. And I remember yesterday morning, I asked someone from the legal clinic in Dardia Joseph. She runs Saint Michel Legal Clinic. I said, I was trying to get a better sense of like, well, what is the typical profile of somebody who gets profiled in Montreal-Nord? She said, there's no typical profile. You get profiled from the age of 12 until you're an old lady. Like, it doesn't matter. The police are gonna scrutinize you in your own home, and like they're gonna kind of ask you to justify why you're going here, why you're hanging out with these people, where you are. It is a kind of like, and so like, it may sound silly to say this, but it begins with a kind of, you know, you treat children like they're suspects, and there was an old lady, I shouldn't say that. There's an elderly woman who was saying, she was so upset. She was screaming about, like, when she was younger, or no, not that long ago, she had been handcuffed by the cops because a white woman said she stole her wallet. Mm-hmm. And when the cops finally go through the wallet and see this woman's picture and her kids, and they realize, like, oh, this was bullshit. Mm-hmm. So, it's and then so you go from that, and like they're ripping locks, which like it's like it's a black cultural thing, right? And they're literally ripping it out of these guys. These white guys are like ripping it out of people's hair, according to reporting by Radio Canada,
keeping it as trophies
and La Presse, and keeping it as trophies. And like, there's so many levels to how racist that is, and how messed up that is, and how humiliating that is. And that humiliation, I think, is a huge part of this. And it's what, I think, I don't know, like it seems to be fueling like this sense that, why would you trust any of these investigations?
Of course.
The police investigating the police. The police is an institution. It's not like, in this particular instance, no one was shot. No one was killed, but it's part of a climate where people are shot and people are killed because of often these determinations police make with people of color, that they don't make these same generalizations and judgments and jump to conclusions with whites. It's just, there's a ton of stats to back it.
Of course. And I think we were talking before the show, it's like, of course, we have this stuff happening here in Montreal, and there's these Montreal specificities to it, like which neighborhoods it happens in, where these cops are coming in from. But I think, Chris, you made a good point before about how this is not a Montreal problem, right? This is something that's like across North America, even globally, right? This kind of like police oppression.
Yeah, but it's a lot worse in places where you don't recognize it's a problem. And for 8 years, we've had a government that has just, any suggestion of institutional racism, any suggestion of systemic racism means you're less loyal to the Quebec nation. Any kind of critical look at the police and at who we are as Quebecers kind of makes you a traitor. And what happens when you constantly tell people, like, you give people a pass, when you constantly say this is an isolated event, it keeps happening. And when 16 officers at a station that probably has maybe 60 officers, that's like a third that's the night shift, the entire night shift of the entire patrol night shift of this PDQ 30 is gone. How deeply ingrained in the culture of the police is just basic brutal racism if a third of the cops have to be transferred. And one of these investigations has been forwarded to Quebec's Crown Prosecutor. And I think another important thing to note is, like, how did we find all this out? Cops came forward and denounced their colleagues. Do you know how racist you have to be as a cop for other cops to denounce you? And I'm not saying, like, this isn't like, oh, all cops are racist, but like there is a culture of just, you don't tell on the other cops.
You protect your own.
Ever.
Yeah,
you don't ever. It doesn't matter if what they did was wrong. You don't cross that line. And that line was crossed. And I think,
to such a degree, right, that like it brought forward this like investigation that's been going on since March. Since March has been going on.
It's been going on since March, and the chief comes out on a Friday at 10:30 telling everyone he's so surprised. That's really messed up. And like that too, like, what is I think we need to know who reported this, but like how did this take 3 months and we're only starting to find some of this stuff out? I understand you have to protect the integrity of an investigation, but for the people on the ground who have to suffer these humiliations daily, it's unacceptable.
No, of course. I mean, I think let's talk about this 10:30 p.m. conference, right? Because I think you and I, and of course our other colleagues, we're in Ottawa at a conference. And I think this is after the conference. It's like 10:30. I remember checking my phone. I was like, there's a press conference going on right now? It's like almost my bedtime. This is kind of like ridiculous. And then you see the reports of what's coming out. This kind of this trophy hunting by these cops.
It's really messed up. Yeah.
I think to me,
it's hard to get over that.
What marks me about this is how the urgency they felt about having to do a press conference at 10:30 p.m. about the trophy collecting of locs. To me, what that suggests, I wonder how much more is in this report and how much worse does it get, that they felt like they need to get on top of it at 10:30 p.m. Friday night.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? The old joke in politics is like, if you want to brush something under the rug, you You send out the release. Bad news, you send it out at Friday around 4 o'clock when almost everyone's out of the office, but it's 10:30. And I mean, I think Fadi Dagger is very much a like political creature. He understands public relations. He understands, you know, he was the former chief of police in Longueuil. He has always presented himself as a reformer, as somebody who can change the system from the inside. And I don't know. It strikes me that this is a political instinct on his part to just get himself on the record as saying he's disgusted, he's shocked, whatever. Who knows what's going to happen next? But you know, if accountability is what you're looking for, maybe all this media scrutiny causes, like maybe the police give us some sacrificial lambs and they think, okay, well, they'll shut up.
We got to
after
protect the
this.
system, so these 16 have to be cut, and hopefully we
Yeah.
can like contain it there, maybe. But I mean, these are all, of course, just kind
Because
of
it's no longer like,
guesses.
oh, the guy reached for a knife, or the kid was big and I was scared of the kid. It's you're ripping hair out of someone's body.
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah,
torture.
yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
torture. This is humiliation. And
How do you? There's no justification to that at all, you know.
there's like, I remember years ago, and this is in Unamen Shipu, it's Innu community, real far. And there was a video that surfaced of these cops on top of a guy just raining down blows. And I spoke to a criminal defense attorney who said, like, it doesn't matter if the guy swung a baseball bat at the cops, if he spit at them, if he shot a gun at them. Once you have somebody subdued, your job is not retribution. Your job is not like satisfying whatever your adrenaline wants you to do. You are a representative of the judicial system. Your job is to put the person into the system and let the system do its work, not exact some kind of personal revenge. And I think what we're seeing is more and more is that like the street cop on the corner will do that, will exact revenge, will hold vendettas. You talk to people on the ground who've been profiled by the same officers again and again and again, and like they get scared when they leave their house in their own neighborhood that they'll run into this guy. So again, like it's hard to look at this and not lose your trust in the institution if you had any left.
Of course.
You know, the main mechanism we have in Quebec for officer-involved violence of any kind, Bureau des enquêtes indépendantes, was created after an unarmed teenager was killed in Montreal-Nord, Freddie Villanueva. He was shot to death. And the neighborhood, you know, of course, erupted, right? And that led to the creation of this internal investigations unit with like some civilian oversight, and they have investigated 39 officer-involved shootings since then. And
How many?
Zero have resulted in disciplinary actions against the officers. Zero have resulted in criminal charges. The cops, in other words, are always right.
Yeah.
You flip the side. Let's flip the roles for a second. I was speaking to Madame Joseph from the legal clinic, and she said that there's roughly 500 complaints every year of racial profiling from the police. Less than 2% of those result in disciplinary sanctions. So every time the cops shoot you, they're right. Every time you claim the cops racially profiled you, you're wrong.
Right, of course.
What is that like? So there's no justice there. What are people going to do? They're going to go create their own justice, and that's not like they have no choice, right?
Yeah,
they want it. It's the most human thing to want to be heard, to want to be respected, to want to feel like you're a human being with dignity. And when that gets taken away from you systematically, you will reclaim it. And I don't think the police are going to like how people reclaim it if they keep pushing. I mean, we'll see.
It's only just beginning, but this feels like I think it's important to know that this is like, as Cliff and I were saying, this is like a chapter in a long book of police violence, of kind of systemic oppression against Black people, Arab people in Montreal, Latino people, and it's sort of like the same story, you know. But I will say something that marks me about this one is the scale of sort of what's going on, right? Because usually, it's like you're saying before, you know, usually there's a story of some kind of flash of violence.
Yeah.
And then there's a narrative like, well, maybe the victim shouldn't have been doing that. Maybe the officer is kind of right to have acted the way out of
Freddie
fear.
Villanueva was playing a dice game with his brother.
Here we go, Freddie Villanueva.
And some other kids.
Yeah.
And and his brother was involved in some criminality on some low level. Freddie was a kid who spent his time at the library and picked strawberries in the summer for money. He was a good kid. I mean, they're all good kids, you know.
But I mean, it's even if good or bad, it's like
whatever.
Does it have to result in this kind of violence,
bad,
right?
Nobody deserves violence.
Yeah, because it's a question of like the actual, like, I guess the discipline we expect from these institutional
you
actors.
have to be a perfect victim, right? When you're a person of color, and he was a perfect victim, but the police approached him because he was playing a dice game, and that's against the bylaw. That bylaw had never been applied before. So it's like it strikes people as an excuse for cops to go and intervene. And what happened? Well, there was a struggle because they wanted to arrest the brother, and it in the struggle, the cop felt scared for his life, even though all the kids are unarmed and they're children. And he fired his gun a bunch of times. He killed Freddie, and he shot another kid. That kid survived, but you were shot by the cops. You're never going to get over that. What we found when that happened, and the reason they created this civilian oversight body was that
the
BEI was that the two officers involved in the shooting, Jean-Louis Lapointe, and I don't remember the woman officer's name, but they were allowed to sit together alone for like an hour after the shooting. What do you think they did? What do you think they like? Do you think they got their story straight?
Yeah.
And then they gave a statement. So their stories match. This is against police protocol. It doesn't matter. So they create the BEI. And then what happens? Well, these incidents still keep happening.
Of course. I mean, recently, Abisse Cruz, right, in Longueuil.
Yeah.
So this is not the SPVM.
Or sorry, Abisse was in Saint Michel, I think. Abisse Cruz was in
Yes,
Saint Michel.
you're right.
And
Nuran Rezaei.
But is Abisse Cruz, like, he was having what I think was like a mental health breakdown. The cops get on it, put their knee on his back, get him face down, and the guy dies calling for his mom. Like, how? Imagine you're the cops standing, like, this guy no longer poses a threat to you. He's calling for his mom. He dies. Like, how little respect do you have to have for the humanity of another human being when you're doing something like that?
I think it goes back to what you're saying before, right? About the trophies, these kinds of mind games, the humiliation.
It's really messed up.
To me, it's like that signals that, for these cops, these bad apples, as it were, it's not just about kind of like whatever is textbook things for cops to do. There's this kind of game of power, this kind of thing of dominance, exactly, right? That they want to enact on certain populations in Montreal, and this is like well documented. This is not like nothing new. And I think thank you for the correction.
So Nuran, here's
yes, exactly.
The link I was trying to make is with BEI, right? You can't let the cops mess with the integrity of an investigation into the police. What happens with Nuran? There are 90 minutes that elapse between the time Nuran is shot and the time they call the BEI to come and start their investigation. 90 minutes. What do you think they did for 90 minutes? Hour and a half. Did they maybe spend that time looking for a gun that never materialized? Did they spend that time getting their story straight, lining up their evidence, maybe pressuring some of the witnesses? Who knows? Like, this speculation is what we have to do because the cops weren't straight with how it happened. So that's one thing. The other thing is, they waited 5 minutes to perform life-saving CPR on an unarmed child. Like, they were so focused on exonerating themselves that I don't know if he would have survived or not, but we'll never know.
Of course, yeah.
And moreover, the initial statement by the police, which they leaked through their guy at Radio Canada, Patrice Robida, he's the crime reporter there, but they leaked stuff to him, was that 58 seconds had elapsed between the time the police officer, or the car stopped, cop got out, shot Nuran. They say a minute elapsed. We saw security footage later obtained by someone's like doorbell security footage. Car stops, 10 seconds elapse, and the shooting starts. So you go from a situation where you could conceivably think of like the cop has his gun out and like, hey, put it down, kid, whatever, to like 10 seconds. There's no back and forth. 10 seconds is basically
immediate escalation.
You start shooting.
Yeah.
And of course, so the parents are suing the city. And like, look, purely from a government perspective, these are not free. Like, you're going to spend a lot of money defending these cops in court. You're going to spend a lot of public money investigating yourself. And you're going to lose a lot of trust from the public. They're not going to come to you when they witness a crime. They're not going to come to you for help. So it's this incredibly self-defeating thing that we're all funding because every politician in the city is scared shitless of the police brotherhood, of ending up on their bad side. They went after Marc Plante during her first re-election campaign. She still won, but they are not a union. They're a political force in the province, and they are dictating the way we see crime. They're dictating the way we see the solutions, and they're doing this despite like not the best performance from their officers.
I really appreciate you bringing up. I think framing the police union, the SPVM police union, as a sort of political force, because you actually saw that just last week, right, with the police union calling on current Montreal Mayor Soraya Martinez-Ferrada to enact a bylaw that would make it that would hand out fines for insulting police officers, and this absolutely ties into what we were talking about before, about like this kind of. These, I don't know if it's like the term is like a fragile ego, but these kinds of mind games that they're in, right? It's not just doing things by the textbook. They want that kind of dominance. They want respect. And if they find that someone is disrespecting them with insults or anything like that, they want to be able to find that person, which is like, I think there's immediately questions of charter rights being kind of violated, not being able to express yourself against an officer, or the fact that like you shouldn't disrespect an officer and that itself should be a crime.
And they're basing it on a video that surfaced of a guy just berating a woman officer with like misogynistic insults, and you should not do that.
Of course,
it's not right. But I think we're all big enough to understand that like a cop, if you talk to a police officer that way, they will figure out a way to like get you in trouble. Like I'm not, I don't think we necessarily need to do a new bylaw, but this is a classic. Here's an example of how good politically the police brotherhood union is. Now, what they did is they commissioned a poll, right, where they said 70% of Montrealers want this. They want a law where you can't insult police. And you say like, oh shit, that's 70%. That's a pretty good consensus.
That's a lot of people, yeah.
That's a poll of 600 people, which is not super representative of the entire island. It's a poll of 600 people. I'm told that minorities were underrepresented in the poll and that people who earn more than $100,000 a year were overrepresented in the poll. So even if it's 60%, even if it's 55%, we don't vote on basic rights. We like the rights are the rights. Yeah. We don't get to when they're popular or not popular.
Otherwise that's getting into some kind of apartheid system, right?
Exactly,
right? Or whatever dominant group gets to decide who gets rights, whether they get rights, and whether minority groups don't get rights.
Human rights are not always popular. Yeah. If you were to poll people about gay marriage in the 90s, probably a majority would have said we don't want this, and probably our views were even worse. The thing about Martinez-Ferrada is that like. Again, this ties into how good the police union is at like stirring up public sentiment. There had been a real push over the last few years to say, look, we need more money. There's so much crime. The crime is out of control. And the increase in crime was not nearly as dramatic as the police said it was. And it was also far likely more related to poverty and the loss of social services and the pandemic and all of these things where like we saw homelessness go up. We saw people struggling financially go up. Like these are much more factors in whether people resort to criminality than like how many boots there are on the ground. And so they are dictating how we have a conversation about the police. And but to tell you how tough this scandal is on them, even the president of the union, who could not say a bad thing about police if, anyways, he's not critical of the police usually. He said this is disgusting, and if these allegations are true, like these guys need to, they need to face the harshest discipline. It's bad when the police union is saying that, and so, like coming into her administration, Martinez-Ferrada, the mayor, like she wants this fine thing where you can like fine people for swearing at the police, and then she also wants to create a system of doorbell cameras.
Yes,
it's a voluntary system, but you could basically connect your doorbell camera to a database that the police could access. She wants body cams is going to be the big solution to all of this, even though there's zero evidence. Body cams reduces racial profiling.
It feels like such an antiquated measure, because it's been utilized in the States and like now
it's been debunked.
Completely
times.
debunked. Yeah, because the whole concept I read about it is that when it's the same thing, right? About police investigating police. If you give police the tool to surveil themselves, it doesn't change anything, right? Because they're going to be the ones in control.
Also, that what you're doing, that body cam is just it's used to collect evidence against suspects.
Of course,
so it's another tool of oppression. It's another tool of surveillance.
Also, another way that that police get to pad their budgets even more. Montreal famously the budget takes up such a massive part of the overall city budget. And compared to other cities in Canada, it's like other cities in Canada point to Montreal and they're like, hey, why other police departments around Canada,
Why can't we get all those
point
toys?
to Montreal and they're
Yeah.
like, why can't we have that kind of budget? Which goes to show how this money is being used.
It's $1 billion a year. They go over budget all the time. They get
Overtime.
rewarded for going over budget by getting more money. And now body cams is not free. They're hugely expensive. You have to store the data somewhere. And then there's the whole ethical issue of like, well, what's going to be on those cameras? Who's going to get to see it? What about people's privacy rights? It's a huge mess. And I don't think this administration understands how frustrated people are. I don't think this is something that will be reformed. I think we'll see if people continue to mobilize, and they already have been. We'll see if they continue to mobilize. We'll see how this how the cookie crumbles here. But I am I like this is not just this government, but so many governments. They treat voters like they're customers, right? And like, oh, the customers don't want the streets to be dirty with homeless people. So how could we help the customers? The customers are afraid of going in this neighborhood, or how can we help the customers? And we don't think about the people who are living on the streets, the people who are living in this neighborhood. Of course, they deserve to be safe. Of course, they deserve to not have a massive street gang problem. But the way to fight back against that is not to cut all these social programs and put the money into repression. It's the opposite. It's to invest in social programs and to invest in actual community building. But that doesn't give you instant results, and it's not a fancy election promise.
No, absolutely. I mean, we'll see how this develops. I'm expecting a lot to come out of this, because I think about the last time people really mobilized in Montreal and against like police violence. It was I feel like the George Floyd protest and like the 2010s. That was a massive moment, right? That's like I feel like that was a moment.
Said she was open to defunding the police.
Yeah.
We are a very long way from that. It's only been 6 years, and it feels like it was a lifetime ago.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Because it was just that conversation was shut down. So I'm curious, looking forward with the final reports, how that defund conversation comes back into play. If more people are just appalled, and whether or not the question in people's head is going to be, all this money we're giving the police and it's going to this. At what point do we say enough? At what point do we just stop enlarging the police kind of budget, their powers, their capacity, and start to question what are some other ways towards justice? What are some other ways towards safety, right? Because that's always the big conversation of like, oh, it's all for safety, no. I think there's a lot of that we need to unpack, and I'm sure that it's going to be going on over the next few weeks as this conversations continue to develop.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Chris, you have a new show at the Rover?
Yeah, it's called The Week is Rover. We're going to be talking about this a lot this week. We're going to be showing footage from the protest. Ode and I and Zach were there, so you guys will have some as well. And we are trying really hard to build up our subscriber base, so subscribe on YouTube. I'm sure there's a link in the bio. Thank you very much.
Of course. Please go and subscribe to The Week is Rover. And if you're not subscribed to us yet, please do so. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, which I just discovered recently. Anywhere you can find podcasts, we're on there. So please do follow, and thank you very much for listening. Take care. Hello, everyone. Kalden Dhatsenpa here, host of Local 514. We're continuing the coverage of everything happening around Station 39 in Montreal-Nord. There was a protest just Monday night. We're recording this Tuesday morning. I have one of the journalists at Local 504 who was there, Zach Jutra. You were there with Aude Simon. I'm curious, what did you see at the protest?
Well, so the protest was scheduled for 7 p.m. We got there around 6:30. There was already a ton of people there, a lot of press. The police were already setting up tape to block off certain areas of the police station and their property. It really did begin a little past 7, but everyone was already there. People were already talking to each other. They were already discussing what's going on. There was a lot of emotion. There were people really upset, really angry. There were people crying. There was a lot of emotion from people that were gathered there. The police seemed to be emotionless. It seemed they were keeping their distance for the most part when we were still near the police station. They did at one point move press even further and move people more further away by adding another layer of tape. But that seemed to upset a few people. Of course, this station is accused of some kind of violent actions. So
Very heinous, violent, racist actions. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. What you did some interviews. What were people saying in these interviews? What did it seem like was on everyone's minds?
So, of course, not everyone says the same things. They had different opinions, different ways of thinking about this process. But I did ask people about systemic racism in Quebec because yesterday, before the protest on Radcan, Petroswa spoke with Kristen Frechette, and she said this is not a case of systemic racism. She said, this is a handful, a small amount of people. I don't see this as systemic racism. So I brought that question to people that were there. And of course, people who were there were saying, no, this is systemic racism. Quebec has a problem. The police have a problem. The other thing people are saying is they're open to, a few people were open to this idea of an independent investigation that several politicians and groups are asking for, but they do not want it to be the SQ investigating the police. They don't want police investigating police.
Right.
One person we spoke to said, perhaps a community organization, community members being involved in this investigation or in this oversight.
Wow, fascinating. I mean, I'm not surprised about hearing that from Christine Frechette, our current premier. Her
Part
party,
of the CAQ,
of
yeah.
course, the CAQ famously in 2018, François Legault, former premier, famously said in a debate, there is no systemic racism in Quebec. And it seems like under Christine Frechette, that perspective continues. And then, of course, people in the communities are going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
So we have footage from this, reports of this, our own coverage that is kind of rolling out. Where can people find the coverage what you and Ode are doing on this?
Well, of course, they can find us on YouTube. They can continue following the page outside of the podcast playlist. They can see all of our other reporting. They could also find us on social media with Local 514 Montreal on Instagram. That's where some clips will also be going out. Also, when we're out live at a protest or at an event, we're going to be posting on our story more often. And that's what we did yesterday. And I will mention one other thing. There was an intense moment where police blocked a road during the march, and that really got heated. And organizers of the event were calling for calm because, of course, protesters were upset, and there was some kind of back and forth between police and I captured some of that on our story and posted that yesterday.
Wonderful, wonderful. You can go to our story, check those out, and follow us there to make sure you don't miss any other further coverage. Folks, I want to also guide you to some previous coverage we've done with social workers who felt that their relationships with communities was changing after the death of Abisek Cruz. We've done a lot of coverage on the police in Montreal, on the SPVM, on the SPVM budgets. Please do go to those. I think there's a lot to find out about the history at play here. Things are developing very quickly, and thank you very much, Zach, for coming on and talking about the coverage you're doing and that we are doing here at CUTV, Local 514. Thank you very much.